Hello, welcome to my channel. Let's talk about the potting mix for African violets. In this video I will show you some potting mixes that I tested while trying to grow my African violets last year, and I will show you a recipe of the potting mix that I have used, and I will shortly talk about the new potting mix that I just purchased but haven't tested yet. Let's get started. With smaller collections, when growing just a few plants, the simplest and the easiest solution is to find the African violet soil that is already pre-made or pre-mixed for you, and it can be found in the local garden centers or online. I found this particular brand. It's called Dr. Earth African Violet Organic and Natural Handcrafted Blend Premium Potting Soil, and it has mycorrhizae and beneficial soil microbes inside, and I just added some additional perlite because African violets like their soil well aerated and fluffy, so I added just some extra perlite and my violets responded well to it. Let's check out the ingredients. It has peat moss, composted green waste, perlite, fir bark, sand, alfalfa meal, fish bone meal, fish meal, potassium sulfate, humic acid, kelp meal, endonectomycorrhizae, beneficial soil microbes, and kelp flour. So it has a lot of good stuff. Some of them I'm familiar with and others I've never heard, but I just trust that these are specialists that will make a healthy potting mix for African violets, and your plants will grow happy in it. When potting mix that is designed specifically for African violets is not readily available, there are some other potting mixes that are available in the big box stores and that are designed either for the indoor container plants or for the seed starting that might work. And I tried a few and I mixed them with perlite for my plants and they worked okay. In particular, I like this one. It's Jiffy Natural and Organic Seed Starting Mix. And why I like this particular mix is it's because it has the pH adjuster. And as we know, African violets might have issues with the pH, and I did experience a few, and it helped my plants to bounce back to health. This particular mix has 60 to 70% sphagnum peat moss, which is a very beneficial ingredient in the African violet potting mix, vermiculite, core pith, and lime for pH adjuster. Normally, specialists do not recommend adding much vermiculite or core pith when growing plants on a wick, and I do wick water my plants. So I was a little careful about this mix because it contains vermiculite, both vermiculite and core pith, but I didn't notice any negative impact on my plants, so I can recommend this mix to the African violet growers in lieu of African violet potting mix. I also used this Miracle-Gro potting mix for indoor plants, and I also used the moisture control potting mix, and I like this one the least because for some reason the African violet plantlets that I potted in the mixture of perlite and this particular mix didn't do well, and I don't know if it's because of the potting mix or maybe it was just some other influencing factor. But this one is designed for moisture control, unlike the other two mixes, and so I'm not exactly aware of what element is used in this mix for controlling the moisture. The ingredients that are listed on the back are the same as in, or almost the same as in this one. A very important point that I wanted to make when using the potting mixes that are available in the stores is that each of them contains fertilizers. As you can see here, it says feeds up to 6 months, and this one as well feeds up to 6 months. And so it's very important to read the label on the reverse of the bag to see how much fertilizer this potting mix uses, and then to avoid fertilizing your plants for the first few months until all of the fertilizer that is present in the potting mix gets released into the soil. However, the catch here is to determine when exactly that fertilizer gets released. It does say that it feeds up to 6 months, but we don't know exactly. Maybe it's 5 months, maybe it's 7 months. So it's very important to watch your plants and watch especially for the signs of them receiving not enough nutrition and then starting applying fertilizer to your watering routine. This particular potting mix, Miracle-Gro, for example, that is designed for the indoor and outdoor container plants, has already nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium built in, and they're coated for the slow release. So you can find that information on the very bottom here on the label. When I started growing African violets last year, unfortunately, I was not aware that the fertilizer had already been added to the potting mixes that I have been using. And I started fertilizing my plants immediately when I potted them. And that was a big mistake because I had over-fertilized quite a few of my plants, and I saved one so I can show it to you as an example. This is my beautiful Irish Lassie, or it used to be very beautiful, and I have a video, individual feature for this plant on my channel in case you want to check it out. It was blooming beautifully, and then at some point I noticed that the center started disappearing. Let me zoom in for you so you can see what it looks like now. So now the center of the crown is gone, and what is left instead are several suckers, and I left it to grow suckers so I could then reroot them, and I will be doing it soon, hopefully next month, so I can separate each sucker and then root it and then plant it separately and grow a separate crown out of each of them. But that was a lesson learned for me, and now if I use a ready potting mix, and I try to make my own potting mix at this point, but if I ever use a potting mix from a big box store or a garden center in the future, then I will make sure not to fertilize it for until the plant actually needs it and until I see visually that the plant lacks nutrition. Some brands of perlite also come with fertilizer, so it's important to read the information on the perlite packaging as well. For example, the Miracle-Gro perlite comes with the Miracle-Gro plant food inside, and information about the fertilizer content is available on the back of this package. The most important factor when deciding on the brand of the perlite that you want to use for your African violet mix is the size of the fraction of the perlite, also called a grade. Let's compare these two samples of perlite. On the right is the perlite by Miracle-Gro. It has very fine fraction, and on the left here is the perlite made by Pearl-Loam, and I will include a link to this particular brand in the description box under the video. I bought this particular perlite, the large fraction perlite, from the Greenhouse Mega Store online. So to sum it up, for the quick solution on the African violet potting mix, use any African violet potting soil that is available or any other potting mix for the indoor container plants, and the same amount of perlite. That is when you top water or bottom water your African violets. If you wick water your African violets, I recommend adding up to 60% of perlite to the potting mix. And watch the fertilizing routine. Do not fertilize right away if the potting soil already contains the fertilizer. After using some commercially available potting mixes and learning about other African violet potting mix recipes, I started making a potting mix of my own. And the two main ingredients for my potting mix are sphagnum peat moss and perlite. The coarse perlite in particular that I just talked about. For the peat moss, I use the sphagnum peat moss by Miracle-Gro just because it's readily available in my big box store. And the only thing that I have to be mindful about this particular brand is that it already has the fertilizer, just like the perlite and the Miracle-Gro potting mix. So I don't start fertilizing my violets right away after I pot them in my potting mix, but I wait for about a month or a month and a half, and sometimes 2 months, depending on what the plant looks like. In some recipes, it is recommended to substitute the sphagnum peat moss by the coconut coir, or to add the coconut coir in addition to the peat moss. And I've tried that, and I purchased this brick, which is a compressed coconut pit or coconut coir that makes this one brick makes 2 gallons, and I used a little bit of it just to test, and it made my potting medium too wet for the wick watered plants, and I use the wick watering method on all of my violets. So I stopped using the coconut coir in my potting mix. But if you top water or bottom water, it might be also a good medium to use. I also read about the coconut coir that there are different brands of it, and some of them contain some mineral salts that are not recommended for African violets. So if you would like to use the coconut coir, I recommend researching on the mineral content first and whether or not it is beneficial for African violets. In addition to peat moss, some recipes also recommend using vermiculite, and there are different grades of vermiculite as well. This horticultural vermiculite that I was able to find in the big box store turned out to be very fine, as opposed to the vermiculite that I got from my local African Violets Club, and you can compare the fraction size of these two. So this I got from my club, and I don't know where they got it from, but I'm pretty sure you can find some coarse vermiculite if you'd like to use it. And I do not recommend this fine vermiculite because it's too fine for the African violet potting mix. And the main idea again for the African violet potting mix is to be airy and fluffy and good for the roots to grow. So the African violet roots should grow freely and not be stuck in some solid potting medium. In addition to sphagnum, peat moss and perlite, I use garden lime by Espoma, and it's dolomitic lime. And make sure when you get the garden lime in the store that it says dolomitic on the label, because my understanding is that it is the dolomitic lime that helps normalize the pH in the African violet potting mix. And here on the back it says that the Espoma garden lime is the finest grade of pelletized dolomitic limestone available. Another ingredient is the horticultural charcoal, and I got it at the Armstrong Garden Center. It helps to absorb odors in the soil, and it helps drainage in the potting mix. So I use the charcoal. Then I also use mycorrhizae to promote the healthy root growth, and it's the granular endomycorrhizae. And to help with the digestion of the mycorrhizae, I use some dry molasses that a fellow club member presented me with. So this is the dry molasses, and it's available on Amazon. And as insecticides, I use the Bonide Systemic Houseplant Insect Control and the Diatomaceous Earth. And I also use some hot water to mix the potting mix so it becomes moist. And here comes the recipe. And as promised, here is a quick look at the new potting mix that I just got. It's called ProMix BX. The ProMix brand is used by professional growers. There's another variety that is popular with the African violet growers called ProMix HP. HP standing for high porosity, for the larger content of perlite. This particular variety has biofungicide and mycorrhizae ingredients. Biofungicide helps protect African violets from fungal infections, and mycorrhizae helps them grow healthy roots. I'm very excited about this new mix, and I am looking forward to making my own potting mix using this brand. So that will be coming in the next episode. We will make our potting mix together. Stay tuned.